my good friend from Texas who lives in the heart of oil country USA. Houston, Texas is, in my way of thinking, the center of the universe for the oil industry. And my good friend Pete Olson is one of our members of our Houston delegation, very knowledgeable in this area. He has some legislation, and there may be other things he wishes to talk about. So I yield to my friend Pete Olson, the member from Sugar Land and All Points South, to talk to us about how he feels about what's going on today.
Well, thank you for hosting this special order tonight on such a critically important issue for the American people. I'd like to thank my colleague from Florida for coming by and giving his perspectives on how this disaster is affecting Florida. And I'm going to have a theme tonight, Judge. I was in the Navy for 10 years, naval officer. We're trained to lead. I mean, we're assigned in my aircraft. I was a crew of 12, 5 officers, 7 enlisted folks. I was the patrol plane commander. So those 11 individuals depended upon me to bring them, take them out, do the mission, and come back home safely. And to sum it up in 2 words, the philosophy is leaders lead. And guess what? We're not seeing leadership out of Washington. We've had a very difficult situation. We've had the largest oil spill in American history. And there are thousands of jobs affected by it already. The food processing industry, the fishing industry across the coasts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. The tourist industry, the people, we're hitting the summer season. This is when people go on vacation. We're past Memorial Day. The hotels are about half full from what I hear. It's having a significant impact on the people of the Gulf Coast. But what does the administration do? Do they lead? No. In a knee-jerk reaction to this terrible tragedy again, they impose a 6-month moratorium on deep water drilling. All of it stopped. Again, disaster for our economy and for our nation. Let me go over some of the specifics with you, as I know my good friend knows. The jobs. The numbers I'm hearing are up to 150,000 jobs are going to be lost because of this moratorium. That's 1.5 times my hometown of Sugar Land, which the judge mentioned. That's like wiping Sugar Land and going down to Rosenberg or Richmond and taking them off the map. 150,000 jobs. The rigs that are currently out there, the 33 rigs, I've talked to a constituent in my district who has an ownership interest in 2 of those rigs and asked him last week, how long can you hang out? He said 3 weeks max. How much does it cost you? Well, the rigs are a little different. One's down around $500,000 a day, $500,000 a day. The other one's at $1 million a day. $1 million. This baby goes on, this moratorium goes on for 6 months. That is going to be $180 billion that company is going to just have to absorb. And you know what they're going to do? Guess what? They're going. They're going overseas. He's been talked to. My constituent has been talked to from interest from Australia, from Brazil, from Western Africa, and from Eastern Africa already. And he's considering their options very seriously because he can't afford to be paying $500,000, $1 million per day as long as this moratorium goes on. It's going to have a devastating effect on our domestic production of energy. One of the great problems we have in America, and it's something we should have fixed years ago, is our dependence upon foreign oil. We all remember 1979 when the Shah fell and Iran was taken over by the Ayatollah Khomeini, and the Arab world cut off our fuel supply. I was a 16-year-old in Houston, Texas, just got my driver's license. So my job was to take the car up when it got down to about a quarter of a tank of gas, take it up, get in that gas line, depending on what the last number of your license plate was, odd or even on odd or even day. And I loved it, standing with my radio, my window down. Now that I'm an adult, I realize what a disaster that was, and it's not gone. I mean, it's still out there today. As the judge knows, we've got serious challenges in the Middle East. I mean, the Mr. Khatami in Iran is scary. I mean, he's trying to get a nuclear weapon. He was here in our country a couple of weeks ago at the United States, at the UN, at the United Nations, sat down with George Stephanopoulos, and literally, this is the leader of Iran, told him that the Osama bin Laden is here in Washington, D.C. Let me say that again, Judge. I think Osama bin Laden is here in Washington, D.C. This guy is at the, he's got the finger on trying to get some nuclear weapons. He certainly has some oil, and he's got friends out there, the Saudis and others, who would cut him off if something happens. And what's happened, as you know too, judges, just as well, this administration has hurt our relationship with our great ally Israel. In 18 months, our relationship with Israel has gone from being one of our strongest allies to someone that the world looks at and goes, are the United States really with them? That's creating another dangerous situation where countries out there are going to start taking chances and taking shots at our best friend. And again, what happens at the end of the day if we stand up for Israel? Maybe we get another oil embargo down. We can't afford that. And yet this administration's actions by imposing this 6-month moratorium on deep water drilling in the Gulf is going to help that cause. I don't know where to start sometimes. What we're doing here, as my colleagues mentioned, is we introduced a bill yesterday. Very simple bill, 1 page, half a page. Basically says, let's end the moratorium, Mr. President. We had a meeting today with Mr. Salazar. The Secretary of the Interior came over today. One question I asked him, I really wanted to get his, I asked him, do you believe that you were given all the accurate analysis on the economic impact of this moratorium on deep water drilling, so that when you made the decision, and he stands up and says it was his decision, that you knew all the facts. You knew that 150,000 Americans were going to lose their jobs, that those rigs in the Gulf were most likely going to go overseas, start developing oil in foreign nations, and they're not coming back anytime soon. It's a minimum, from what I've heard from people in my district, of 5 years before those rigs will even consider coming back, because they have paid all that money to go over there. They're going to sit there, they're going to make money, they're going to, again, decrease our national reserves here in America, increase our dependence on foreign oil. Again, Judge, leaders lead. What has the administration done? Well, as you talked about earlier, Governor Jindal asked for some sand, about 24 miles of sand to place in between some of the marshlands that were going to be impacted by the oil spill. Took our government 3 weeks to approve that. Why? Why, you ask? Well, we had to do some studies. The Environmental Protection Agency had to look and make sure that if we put that sand in front of the berms, we weren't going to do some things to hurt the berms and the wildlife behind that. You're going to hurt the wildlife behind that, and you're going to damage those berms if that oil gets in there. Put the sand up, prevent that from happening. Let's deal with that problem instead of going for the sure problem. Amazing. The Jones Act, you talked about that. We've got great allies out there who want to help us, who have come to us and said, please, we can help you. What did we do? No thanks. We've got this law that requires American unions, the CDR's unions, to man the ships. We don't need your help. Katrina, I guess that was 2005. President Bush, he was asked, to waive the Jones Act. He stepped up and did it. Why? Because it was right for America. He was focused on the problem, which was help Louisiana and New Orleans recover from that hurricane. The problem here is real simple, Judge. We've got oil spewed out of a hole in the Gulf of Mexico, about 5,000 foot deep. We need to focus on that. That's the problem, and the administration is not focused on that. Again, leaders lead. And what do we see out of the White House today? Coerced British Petroleum to a $20 billion slush fund, a privately funded slush fund for government to use and spend as they see fit. Now, BP has made some mistakes, and the investigation is not complete, but there's a lot of evidence and indications that they made some mistakes, cut some corners, and did things that weren't consistent with standard operating procedure. And they should pay for that. And they should reimburse the Americans who've been affected by that. But for the government to force upon them a $20 million concession that the government's going to handle and deal out as they see fit is just not what's in our country's interest. We've seen what this administration has done when we give them large amounts of money. First big vote I had as a member of Congress, almost $900 billion in economic stimulus package. Guess what? Has it stimulated the economy like the administration, like the president said it would? Has it kept our job rate below 8%, our unemployment rate? No, we're hovering about 10%. What have we spent it on? You know the answer to that, Judge. 2/3 of the money has been spent on public sector jobs, 1/3 on private sector jobs. I'd submit, and this isn't taking much of a chance, that's not how you grow an economy. And yet, the administration has now coerced British Petroleum to give them $20 billion to spend as they see fit. And finally, I mean, I've got the president's speech right here. About the last third of it didn't have anything to do with the Gulf of Mexico. It had something to do with a much bigger agenda. He was talking about why this substantiated and justified the administration's pursuit of a hydrocarbon emission law, a carbon tax, cap and tax as we call it up here in the House. I mean, again, why are we talking about this when we've got oil spilling out of the Gulf right now? And the answer is because the administration has an agenda that doesn't have anything to do with the oil coming out. It has everything to do with changing America, making us uncompetitive in a global market, increase our cost of energy for every American consumer, and getting a big tax increase with all these payments, these allotments that the corporations, companies, small business across America are going to have to pay. And it's quite frustrating. I mean, I go back home, Judge, I'm sure you get this. What's going on in D.C.? Who's leading? And the answer is nobody's leading right now. Again, leaders lead. And that's why I introduced that law that you mentioned earlier to just repeal the moratorium. Get the American people back working on those wells. The president, as you recall, met this past week with the families of the 11 rig workers that were killed in the explosion. And many of them, from the press reports, told him, please, Mr. President, don't do this moratorium. Don't do this to my husband, who most of these people were born and raised in small towns in Louisiana like Houma. And they planned on living their life there, raising their children there, raising their grandchildren there. And they see what's at stake here. They don't want a moratorium, even though their family members have made the ultimate sacrifice. And it's my hope that the administration listens to the American people, looks at the numbers, the 150,000 jobs that are going to be lost, just the fact that we're going to lose most of our domestic production, offshore production of oil, and we're going to take that overseas to foreign nations. And one other thing is the second largest income tax source for the federal government is offshore drilling, about $6 billion a year. Bye-bye. And it's just incredibly frustrating as a freshman member of Congress that we're going through this, Judge. We need to fight to make sure that this moratorium is repealed because it's in America's best interest. I yield back my time.
Reclaiming my time for a moment is an experienced offshore driller, as we all know. I said, Trent, what kind of salaries these guys make? He said the ordinary laborer, which in my day at least we used to call those guys roughnecks or roustabouts, $60 an hour. And the high-tech guys, the guys that can drive a drill bit down 5,000 feet under the water and another multi-thousands of feet and hit a 12-inch hole where this oil's coming out of, with that kind of skill, they're paid a lot more. Now, the question I would have for the administration, if you take the drilling away, and all those people are looking for a job to replace that income, where is a guy who developed his skills through experience at the low-paid job on a well? So maybe he's got a high school education and he learned his job on the job. Where is he going to find $60 an hour to support his family on?
Well, the gentleman yield.
It doesn't exist. I yield that we got to go to Mr. Gutmer.
Well, Judge, I think
I asked Trent Frank, who
the President gave us the answer to your question there. I mean, in his speech yesterday, and I quote, this is what he said: I already have issued a 6-month moratorium on deepwater drilling. I know this creates difficulty for the people who work on these rigs, but for the sake of safety and for the sake of the entire region, we need to know the facts before we allow deepwater drilling to continue.